Hi, I'm Dr. George Yancey. Let's share some paradigms. Paradigm on share today concerns immigration and what to do about it. I want to lend my voice to the recent struggles we've had with immigration lately. I, like many other people, are concerned. Some people have talked about are we heading towards a civil war? And oftentimes that sounds like hyperbole. And maybe it is. But it does seem that the polarization in our society has grown so much that it's very disturbing. I also want to be a voice because I fear so many of the voices are partisan. Those who know me in my channel know that I'm neither the left or the right. That doesn't mean that sometimes I'm not on the right or not on the left, but I have chosen not to be a partisan. And when we look, especially what's happened in Minneapolis, the voice I keep hearing are things such as, well, look at this group of people. They're the ones who are responsible. Or that group of people. And from my point of view, responsibility flows from multiple sources. There's no one villain. There's no one hero. And that's the way I see it. And I suspect a lot of Americans see it that way. I suspect I'm not the only one who sees it that way. So, given that, I want to lend my observations to these issues. Let me first start off with this. Let me just be open and honest about my personal perspective on immigration, okay? And this is, if I was emperor of the United States, what would I do? All right, so that's where I'm coming from. I would favor a fairly open border and very little kicking people out except for those who commit crimes. Anything above speeding. Because if you're coming to our country, then you really need to follow the laws. And so, yeah, if you violate the laws, then I would have agents come and escort you out. Depending on what the severity of the law. I mean, if it's something that mandated jail time, you serve the jail and then you be out. Otherwise, I would have very little interest in going after people. I would have a lot of latitude in people being able to come into the country. I suppose we need some security because drugs and trafficking can happen and definitely would not want that. But I would probably I'll probably be more on the very liberal side of things. That's my perspective, okay? That's my personal perspective. I realize that perspective did not win, didn't even come close to winning in the 2024 elections. So for me to advocate, this is what we should do to solve the problems, would be for me to say my answers is the answers. And I'm not quite arrogant enough to do that. But I just want to be upfront as to how I see things. And I think that'll help you to see, when I go into this, you see that I'm really trying to find solutions for the situation as is, not as I would want it to be. All right? All right, so let me just suggest this. We are seeing, unfortunately, we've seen some deaths recently. We've seen ongoing conflict. And what I observe is that individuals, partisans, tend to engage in confirmation bias. It sort of disturbs me if every encounter you see with ICE and a resident, if you think ICE is 100% wrong and the resident 100% right, or vice versa. Each encounter has its own unique challenges. Each controversy has its own set of facts. It seems to me that if you were trying to get at the honest truth, you would say, there's a situation where ICE is really wrong. There's a situation where perhaps this person did things that they should not have done. There's a situation which has really been distorted to make ICE look bad. This situation has been distorted to make the civilian look bad. That's more closer to the truth, and yet most people who talk about these issues always wind up with the same side of it. You ever wonder why that is? Can it be that their own preconceptions have colored what they're going to see? And therefore, they come to a conclusion, not necessarily based on the evidence, but they pick the evidence that best suits their solutions. And before you say, yeah, that's what they're doing, I would challenge you to say, is that what you're doing? I admit, I have preconceptions as well. I don't tend to trust politicians on the left or the right, and that colors how I see things. I try to fight against it. I don't always succeed. But being aware of that, and being willing to acknowledge that, okay, sometimes what I'm doing is my hatred of ICE or my hatred of liberals or my hatred of Walz or my hatred of Trump, that's what's doing this. That's what's creating my perception of this given situation. Personally, whenever I see a controversial situation, especially something like a police shooting or an ICE shooting, I want a lot of evidence before I come publicly with where I would come from on that. I remember when George Floyd was killed, I waited to come to the conclusion that the officer should be in jail and is in jail. When Rittenhouse was accused of crimes, I waited. I actually waited till trial, saw the evidence. And I came to the conclusion that it was, while he did some stupid things, it was self-defense. I wish we did that more. And whenever there's the next controversy, when someone immediately jumps on and says ICE is guilty or ICE is innocent, I'm suspicious. So the first thing I think we have to think about is how our confirmation bias colors how we see these things. And the fact that it does is make you a bad person, it makes you a human person. In fact, I've done a video on confirmation bias. I know how powerful it can be. Our current situation, our current problem has many sources. Okay? Let's just be honest about this. Part of the source is the sort of very aggressive stance President Trump has taken with ICE, with immigration policy, with trying to round up 12 million people to kick them out. That's been very aggressive. You know, we've hired a lot of agents, which has created another problem. When you throw a lot of money, and we threw a lot, you know, I forget how many billions of dollars, we threw a lot of money at ICE. Say, hire as many people as you can and go get the job done. Problem with that is you don't have time to prepare them, to train them. And I fear, and I've heard this, and I think it's probably true, that some of the people who are ICE agents right now should not be ICE agents. That they're not equipped for doing that. You have to have a certain mentality to handle this. And I fear that some of the people, perhaps too many of the people who are ICE agents, don't have that mentality. This has led to situations where I believe ICE agents are likely guilty of misuse of power. There's a lot of situations where they're likely guilty of that. And so the rush to just go in and grab people who are undocumented and get them out of the country, you know, that rush to do that, that's part of the problem. There's no doubt about that. The surge intensifies this problem. It makes it worse because now you have a lot of people, and once again, I think many of them are not fully trained, and that causes a problem. But if I leave it there, I'm not doing the problem fully justice. Because let's be honest, some of the problems come from certain politicians, Democrat politicians. What has happened is that ICE is having to perform services that there shouldn't have to be performed. Crowd control should be done by local law enforcement. But you can't do that because we're a sanctuary city. In Texas, where I'm at, we don't have this problem. In part because if someone who's undocumented is arrested, the ICE person can go in and just take control of them. Whereas there's this full resistance. Now, I know where this resistance comes from. There's this feel among many Democrats that we must resist Trump no matter what. I am not a fan of President Trump. Neither do I think I have any sort of derangement syndrome. I admit, sometimes he gets things right. I'm not saying this is one of them, but sometimes he gets things right. I don't feel like I have to resist him no matter what he does. Most people will say that I'm okay with deporting people who've committed felonies. And yet I see very little evidence in these sanctuary cities of identifying an undocumented person who's committed a felony and helping to give him or her over to ICE. Why not? I mean, if you say that we should get rid of people with felonies, but you're not going to work with ICE because you're working with Trump, See, this is problematic. People on the left want to just look at the problems with ICE, and well, they should, but these policies are making it worse. There's no doubt about that. There's no doubt that if you do not give some sort of assistance, just reasonable assistance, we can complain all we want about ICE engaging in crowd control. But first, if they are going to go in and arrest people, no matter who they are, whether they have a felony or not, if they're going to arrest people in a situation where we've worked up crowds in order to be, to resist ICE, and you have no police for crowd control, who's going to do the crowd control? Let's not pretend that they would be allowed to do their jobs unhindered without any sort of crowd control. Let's not pretend that there's no violence whatsoever from the protesters, okay? We can accuse ICE of things, and there are things that I think they're probably guilty of, but I've seen enough footage to know that there's plenty of violence done from the other side as well. And you can say it's less, but it is there. And there's no police to help with crowd control. And you have politicians who are whipping it up. I find it interesting on how people are quick to blame Trump for January 6th, and I think he has some culpability, although I do agree that trying to put him in jail for some of the things, his speech in January 6th, which I think was tried to done, I think that's beyond the pale, but I do think he has culpability. But you really can't say that and then not give culpability to Democrat politicians who talk about kidnapping. I mean, if that's your definition of kidnapping, anytime a police officer arrests someone, that's kidnapping. So there's culpability on all sides. On all sides. And I'm not in the business right now to saying, it's 50% this way or 60-40 or what have you. I'm just saying that this problem is here because of multiple sources. Multiple sources of polarization that continues to plague our society. And we have to find a way out of this. And so I don't want to just talk about the problems. I want to talk about, can we move forward? Okay. Before I do that, let me just go ahead and say that if this is something you enjoy, please like this video. If you want to check around my channel, some of the playlists that I have, please do so. And if you like some of them and want to hear more about it, please give me a like, consider subscribing. If you want to debate this, please offer your comments below. These things help to build the channel, and I hope to try to be a fair arbiter of what's happening out there, being that I'm neither of the left or the right. And this is a Christian channel, although I've not really gone into my Christian faith on this because I think this is something that we all need to struggle with. All right, so that to me is a more nuanced way of looking at the problem. How do we begin to solve this problem? That's very important. All right, I have my basic idea. And one of my playlists is on race relations, where I talk about collaborative conversation. I think some of the principles in that apply here. We've got to start talking to each other and not just fighting each other. I think we need a compromise. Here's the compromise that I see could be useful in the short term. And then we have to look at the long term. In the short term, I think the surge is at a point to where it is more harmful than helpful, even to the causes that the proponents of Trump want to push. I think one thing that the Republicans have to do at this point is to greatly reduce the surge. I'm not saying leave completely, but the surge has to be reduced because that has become a point of conflict. Even if the ICE officers were totally innocent of all things, even if I'm not saying they are, okay, before someone starts saying I am, I'm not. Even if they are, they're acting as a target for the anger many people have at Trump and his policies. And they'll continue to be a target as long as they're there. So one of the things that we're going to have to do is, if we want to walk away out of this, is that we're going to have to reduce or eliminate the surge. Reduce the number of officers in there and not have this huge surge of officers. That's going to be where the conservatives have to have a compromise. Now, you can't just do that. I know progressives say, yes, just do that and it's fine. then the left will have no incentive to negotiate in good faith. So here's what has to happen there. Look, don't tell me you want the undocumented who commit crimes out of the country, then not help because you're mad at Trump. There are more important things than that. If there's undocumented who've committed or charged with a felony, turn them over to ICE. Let them just walk in the jail and get them. I would also say that if they've already had a court hearing and the court has determined they should be deported, let ICE come and get them. If you don't want the surge, then you're going to have to do some of the duties yourself. That's the way it is. You don't want the surge, so do it this way. Now, what I'm saying is that you don't have to help ICE when it comes to just, the grandma has been here for 20 years, or just, an undocumented who's committed no crime and not gone through the court proceedings. I would not expect you to help in that way. But you're going to have to help some if you want to get rid of the surge. Ideally, the local governments and ICE can agree together to such a compromise so that we can take the temperature down for right now. That's very important, to take the temperature down, to reduce the polarization so that we can find real solutions. All right. If we could do that, and I'll be honest, I have my doubts because, once again, I don't have confidence on politicians of the left or the right to do the right thing. My thing is they're going to do the thing they think is politically expedient, which is to whip up their base. But if we can do this short term, long term, we need to stop kicking the issue of immigration down the road. At times, and more recently with the Republicans and President Trump, political parties have kind of kept the issue of immigration so that they could use it in the next presidential election or the next midterm election or anything like that. Okay, you've had your fun. You can see where it's going. Let's stop kicking this issue down the road. Let's deal with this issue right here and right now. Immigration reform. I believe that there is a deal to be made on this, where both sides have to give up something. Some sort of security, naturalization, or legalization of people already here, maybe pathway to citizenship, maybe a border wall. I think there's a deal to be made. I think we can make that deal. Not right now because the passions are too hot. But once we can get this situation under control, we need to make sure we don't get to this point again by negotiating in good faith, knowing which is really important to you that you don't want to give up, but being willing to give up some things to get the deal you want. That's the way to move forward. That's the long-term solution. We want to short-term cool things down, but long-term, we got to find a useful immigration deal to move on from this. Once again, I'm not confident in our politicians. And I hope you share this video around because maybe if some of us could put more pressure on them to make a deal, to cool the situation down, to be willing to, on the left, to work with those cases which we have said should be adjudicated, to work with ICE, and on the right, to stop the surge. If we can do this, then we can cool ourselves down, and then maybe, just maybe, we'll be able to find solutions to this current problem. And some of the fears of a civil war or deepening polarization, maybe they can go away. Well, thanks for tuning in, and like I said, please consider passing this video around, and let's push for a way that's not just partisan, but just really solves the problems that we have today. If you like this, please come back, and I'll shatter some more paradigms.